Welcome to the NASCAR DFS Strategy Show right here on Awesemo.com. I am Jason Floyd. As you see on the screen right now, we got a new guy here on the show. Chris, welcome to Awesemo, man. First off, let everyone know, a little about you and, of course, what you've been doing.
Appreciate it, Jason. I'm Chris Pennell. You probably guys might have seen me over on my own YouTube channel. It's just Chris Pennell. I cover NASCAR every single week, do some other sports as well, and I just want to thank the Awesemo staff for bringing me on. Look forward to it.
And, of course, we're here to talk about the NASCAR season series finale 500. I guess we don't even have a sponsor for this one. But first off, let's kind of talk a little roster construction. Chris, let's start with you, man. How are you building your lineups for this one?
So I was looking at the past 6 previous optimal lineups here, and for the most part, we're going to see about 2 to 3 dominators per lineup. I think in cash games, you're going to want to stick with 2 just to get some extra PD guys. Because, again, in cash games, if you take a third dominator and that guy doesn't end up dominating, you might end up losing out to a guy that has an extra place differential play. But in tournaments, 3 dominators, if you nail those 3 dominators, there's a good chance you can be optimal as long as you hit your studs and not your studs, your mid-range plays and your value plays.
Phil, how about you, man? I know I've read some of the stuff that you've put up there. I've seen some tweets from you this week. What's kind of your thoughts on roster construction?
Yeah, for sure. Looking at DK specifically here, like the spring race, it was a 3 dominator build, and we actually had a 4th dominator in Brad Keselowski, but some weird things happened with him towards the end of the race. He pitted when he probably really shouldn't have, and it screwed up where he was going to finish. So, I mean, there may have even been the weird possibility that in a 300, plus lap race that we would have had 4. I don't know if that really would have worked with the punt plays, but it was a 3 dominator build. You go back to this race last year, it was a 3 dominator build. You go back to the spring race in 2019, it was a 2 dominator build, but that was because we had Kyle Larson starting 31st, who finished 6th, and then you had Clint Boyer starting 26th, who finished 11th. So you had 2 place differential guys that were able to fill the void of that 3rd dominator. And then you go back to 2018, it was, I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly, yeah, it was a double dominator, actually a triple dominator build with Busch, Keselowski, and Harvick as your dominators. Now, if you look at FanDuel, you're still playing on FanDuel. It's all over the place. We've got 3 dominator builds. We've got 1 dominator build. It was just a matter of what crazy things were happening with place differential. So I'm there with Chris. In my GPP tournaments, the majority of them, I'm looking for 3 dominators. But when it comes to cash, I'm getting into, and then I'm finding my place differential guys to fill in that void.
Yeah, that's always a conversation we have of how many dominators you build. You talk about FanDuel. We talked about this. Me and Phil talked about this last week on the show. In terms of FanDuel, I'm a cash games player over there. I really don't go toward GPPs. I think there's some good contests in cash to maximize your bankroll. But obviously, I know a lot of people are more on the DraftKings side of things. So on DraftKings, I mean, what would be your advice to our listeners and watchers of how many dominators we should go with? Phil, let's start with you, man.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get a 2 dominator build and go with Jimmy Johnson or William Byron as your 3rd piece, your kind of higher priced place differential guy, and then go on from there. Oddly, in the championship race, DraftKings decided that the 2 most expensive drivers were going to be guys that can't contend for the championship. So thus that pushed the prices of everybody else down. So cash games, it's not that tough to get those 2 dominators plus the higher price place differential guy in there this week.
Chris, what's your thoughts on how you're building your DK lineups?
I agree. So I was just running through some example lineups before I got into the show. When I was trying to build a cash game lineup, for example, I was kind of on a Chase Elliott Keselowski thing. Then for my 3rd guy, I would be more on the William Byron, Jimmy Johnson train, just like Phil said. But for tournaments, I'm kind of looking at maybe someone like Kyle Busch starting in 8th, I believe, at around $9,800, because that'd be a nice 3rd dominator play in tournaments because of how good he is at Phoenix. So in cash games, I'm probably looking at a Byron, and then in GPPs, maybe someone like potentially Blaney's, potentially Kyle Busch.
Of course, if you're watching us live right now on YouTube, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Of course, if you're not subscribed to Awesemo, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell when you know a new video is live. Coming up here today on Awesemo at 1:30 p.m. each time. We got On the Contraries. Guys, we'll get you ready for tomorrow's NFL. Then I'll be back at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for MMA Live Before Lock, as myself and Pete Rogers Jr. will get you ready for tonight's UFC action. But, of course, we do break down this race in terms of tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll start off with tier number 1. These are the drivers that are in the 11K and 10K range on DraftKings. So we got Martin Truex Jr. starting 13th. He's 11-4 on DK, 11-5 on FanDuel. Kevin Harvick starting 11th, 11-1 on DK, 12-3 on FanDuel. Brad Keselowski starting 3rd, 10-8 on DK, 13-5 over on FanDuel. Chase Elliott on the pole. He's 10.6K on DraftKings, 12.5K on FanDuel. Denny Hamilton starting 4th, 10.3K on DK, 13,000 even on FanDuel. And then we got Joey Logano starting 2nd, 10,000 on DK, 13,300. Chris, let me start with you because you mentioned about Joey Logano starting 2nd. Talk to me about that $10,000 price tag on DK in terms of how you have broken down this race.
So in the pre-show, I know Phil might not agree here, but I do like Joey Logano. He's been super, super good at the short flat tracks this season. I mean, he's first in average green flag speed at this track type this year. He's yet to finish outside of the top 5 at these tracks this year. And if you're looking at similar tracks, Martinsville is kind of similar. It's more unique, but still you can look at Martinsville, Richmond, obviously Phoenix and New Hampshire. And Joey Logano has been very solid each one. He won this race back in March, led 60 laps, and he's just been phenomenal at these track types. And I know people might be worried about, so a lot of people are going to play Chase out in the pool. And when people do that, they get afraid of rostering the guy in 2nd place. So we saw back in March, the guys starting in 1st and 2nd, which was Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick, they combined for 160 lap sled. So I don't think that's out of the equation here.
Phil, let's I guess talk a little about Joey Logano and your thoughts on him in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find a reason not to like Joey. Like Chris said, you look at the 5 corollary tracks. That would be, of course, the Phoenix race earlier. You've got New Hampshire. You've gotten the 2 Martinsville races, and then you've got Richmond. Joey's the only driver in this field that finished in the top 5 in every single race. You go back to March. He won this race. He had to fight his way from the double digits, much like Radek Keselowski, but found his way there and ended up winning the race. It's my only hesitation with Logano is I really like Chase. I really like Keselowski, and it's a bit narrative, but I wonder just how much of all of the Joe Gibbs resources are going into Hamlin's team this week, considering that he's the only Joe Gibbs driver. So it has me wondering, in a Hamlin versus Logano scenario, which one of these two is going to be more likely to lead, win, end up with more dominator points. And I don't want to say it's a gut feeling, but I keep finding myself with the idea that in terms of dominator points, that Logano is going to be the guy for me that's going to lead the least. But in the end, I mean, and I've put this all over the place in articles and on social media. I mean, I'm taking a 60% ownership stake in every single one of these 4. I'm going to find a way to get all of these guys in combinations with each other, whether in 3 dominator or two dominator builds. So, I mean, when it comes down to single entry, I'm not going to have Logano. It'll probably be Chase and Brad, even though that's probably going to be the chalkiest combination. I really like those 2. But for multi-mass entry, Logano definitely has to be in your dominator pool this week.
So I got to bring up this tweet that you had earlier this week where Phil said, DraftKings pricing both Martin Truex Jr. and Kevin Harvick more than any of the 4 championship drivers is interesting, perhaps more like baffling. Harvick, I get based on a pass, but Truex is a hard sell as the most expensive driver this week at $11,400. Phil, let me start with you, just kind of your thought process in that.
The only reason I can justify these prices is place differential. Like DraftKings has decided, if you're going to play these drivers, you are paying $500 to $1,000 more than the rest of these guys for, maybe 8-10 extra place differential spots. And Truex, I don't see as a likely dominator here. And the 4 races since the reconfiguration, he's got a 6th and a second, but over those 4 races, he's only averaging 4.8 laps led with an average running position of 8.3. And plus, when you look at his odds, and now these are from Friday morning at the DraftKings Sportsbook, his odds are plus 1,100. Out of everybody in this tier, that is the worst. I mean, I can definitely make the case for Harvick. He is the favorite on the DK Sportsbook at plus 400. He's got 9 career wins here. Ever since the track was reconfigured, he's the only he's one of only of another driver to score 4 top 10s at Phoenix since the track was reconfigured. Now his numbers haven't been, like, dominator wise, they haven't been as good as before the old layout, but still he's been so good. And Jordan McAbee of Fantasy Racing Online, he put this in his article, the possibility that the 4 team thought that they were a shoe-in. Like, they thought that they were destined because of points to make their way in. So there's a good chance that this car that was prepared for Phoenix has had extra time put into it. And plus, you know, Harvick wants to go out and show that if it wasn't for what happened late in that race, that he could have gone out and won this championship just the same himself.
Chris, what's your kind of thoughts on the pricing of Truex Jr. and Harvick?
So I'm kind of right with Phil here. I think Truex is a hard pass for me. Like, maybe I'll sprinkle him in just maybe a little bit in 150 lineup builds, because you got to remember, back here in March, he started from the rear in the field, but he made his way all the way up to first before wrecking out, and he led some laps, and he was overall very fast. But again, I just have a hard time seeing him be able to dominate over any of the guys in the Final Four and Kevin Harvick. So if I'm going to go with any of these guys, I would start with Kevin Harvick. He was great here back in March. He finished second behind Joey Logano. Well, he led 67 laps, which is the 3rd most. He had the 2nd most fast laps. He had an average running position of 2.6 in that race, and he was first in average green flag speed. And again, I know he's not in the Final Four, and the narrative is the Final Four guys are in the top 4 punch the entire race. But if Kevin Harvick's faster than one of those guys, he's not past them. And like I said, he's the favorite in Vegas. So I definitely like Kevin Harvick, and you get some PD upside starting in 11th, and he'd be a decent pairing with one of the guys starting up front as well.
Of course, if you're one of our premium subscribers over at Awesemo.com, you can get into our Slack channel, which you can see the race sheets that Phil puts together every week. Also, you can get our ownership projections. You can see where all these guys are projecting their ownership to be. And looks like Joey Logano's got some good ownership, so you got to take advantage of that. Of course, if you want to sign up for your Awesemo Plus weekly pass, you can do that right now by just going to awesemo.com/join, or right there at the top left-hand side of the screen, you see Awesemo Plus. Sign up for a weekly pass for $29.95. They get you full access to all of our premium tools and content we have on the website, such as ownership projections. And if you're just looking for a NASCAR pass for tomorrow's race, you can sign up right now for $9.95. Awesemo.com/join to sign up for a weekly pass. As I was mentioned, looking at some of the ownership and looking at these top drivers, Brad Keselowski is the guy that we're seeing the most. And I mean, look, Phil, has there become a point where you look at Truex's ownership and do you kind of start going, okay, maybe I got to sprinkle him in?
Like, if we're looking at single digits here, and and of course I'm logged out. Jason, what are we looking at with Truex's ownership numbers right now?
Just under 15%.
Yeah, if that was in the single digits, then I might be a little more intrigued. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing with that 11.4 price tag on DK. Besides Truex making his way into the top 5 or getting to the lead, you are going to need just that many more dominator points out of him versus the rest of the crew.
I think Denny Hamilton is one guy that we haven't really talked about that's in this tier, starting in the 4th position. Chris, what's your thoughts on Denny Hamilton?
Well, I'm a little back and forth because overall he has struggled with these track types this season. Now, overall in his career, short flat tracks is kind of like his bread and butter, very, very good. But so far this season, he ranks 15th in average green flag speed at the short flat tracks this year, and only 1 top 10 finish, and also that would obviously mean only 1 top 5 finish as well. But the one thing that I do like about him is that he's the only JGR car in the championship that's contending for it, so the team should be able to dial in his car and make it pretty fast. And like I mentioned, he does typically crush these short flat tracks, and I don't know. It's just tough because I like Keselowski, I like Logano, I like Kevin Harvick, and I think I said Chase Elliott. So I might be a little bit lower on Denny Hamlin, but obviously since he's in the Final Four, I'm going to have exposure to him. But there is some concerns here with the speed he's shown at these track types this season for sure.
Phil, what's your thoughts on Denny here?
I mean, I couldn't be more in line with Chris. It's odd because I know how good of a short track driver that he is. And I mean, you go back to this race last year, he won the race. He was the top overall driver, nearly led half of the race. And you look at, like, if we just want to shrink this corollary even more to just Richmond, New Hampshire, and then the previous Phoenix race, those 3 races, because they're all using the same tire package. Hamlin's leading the second most laps on average at 45.7, 24 fastest laps, but yet he's got the 8th best finish. So, you know, it's odd. Now, of course, he didn't lead any laps in this race in the spring. So what he's done has primarily come from that New Hampshire race where he led the second most laps behind Brad Keselowski. It's like, I can make the case for why Hamlin should be in your lineups, but when it comes to single entry or 3 max, I can honestly tell you that he's probably not a guy that should be the focus of those lineups.
Of course, if you do have any questions for the guys on tomorrow's race, just you can pop those in the YouTube chat. And if you're one of our premium subscribers, do that in our premium NASCAR Slack account. We will get those questions in there as we do go throughout the show. We'll move on to tier number 2. These will be the drivers in the 9K and 8K range. We got Ryan Blaney starting 5th, Kyle Busch starting 8th, Jimmy Johnson 26th, Alex Bowman 6th, Kurt Busch 7th, Eric Jones 14th, William Byron 25th, Tyler Reddick 21st. I know, Chris, you talked about William Byron a little while ago. Ryan Blaney, guys, is the guy that we're projecting as the most owned driver at this point.
Really?
Yeah, he's by far. He is he's got about 10% over Brad Keselowski.
Personally, I could see that end up going to William Byron, to be honest, because I think most people are going to go with like around 2 to 3 guys up top, and I think William Byron's going to slide. I don't know if Phil agrees with that.
It's a whole lot easier to go with that lineup construction. Like if you're playing around with 3 guys above the 10K mark, and especially if you are involving Truex and Harvick in your lineups, then I mean you are necessarily forcing yourself down in the punt range and possibly 2 of those guys. So if you can eliminate one of those 3 dominators in exchange, saving $2,000 for Byron, that's a lineup construction that a lot of people are gonna say, hey, that looks a lot more aesthetically pleasing than having JJ Yaley and Brennan Poole filling out the back end of my lineup.
Yeah, for sure.
The driver in this tier that we are right now projecting the lowest owned in this tier, and it's under 5%, Alex Bowman. Why do you think everyone is kind of off him this week? Phil, if you want to kick it off.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I go. Okay. So Alex Bowen, personally, I have some notes written here, and my first note, as I said, is I hate to say I'm fading someone, but I have a hard time saying Bowman be optimal. I mean, he's $9,000. He's starting 6th. I don't think he's going to have a bad race here, but overall, it's not one of his better tracks, and he's going to have to dominate at some point, and he doesn't offer us any PD upside. If he finishes 5th, sure, it's a good race for Bowman, but is that really going to be enough to be optimal? Like, there's some other guys in this range that has at least some PD upside.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue for me is that he's starting in a position where he doesn't give you upside. And if he does have upside, it's going to be tied to dominator points. And I mean, this historically has not been a track that he has laid down dominator points. Like if you look, the one time that he did it is when he started on the pole filling in for Dale Jr. a few years back. But of late, his averages are 0 laps led and 1.5 fastest laps, an average finish of 26 with an average running position of 17.4. And that's with a top 10 average starting position. I mean, it just doesn't, the track doesn't line up. The position doesn't line up. And if you try to make a case based on the corollary tracks, I mean, I can somewhat see it. The average finish is 10 out of the 5 races, but still, I mean, you need something positive out of Bowman at this price.
Let me ask you about, you mentioned a little bit about William Byron starting 25th, but how about Jimmy Johnson starting 26th in terms of point differential? Chris, what's your thoughts?
So personally, I can't see myself going with too much Jimmy Johnson because I feel like he's a very similar play to William Byron. And personally, I like William Byron just a little bit more than Jimmy Johnson. I'd rather get a third dominator in my lineups instead of going at Jimmy Johnson, especially in tournaments. He's fine in cash games. Like he has top 10 upside. I know he had a good finish here back in March. Yeah, finished 12th in March. And if he does that, sure, that's fine. But he just doesn't have this ceiling like a guy that can get up front and dominating. So again, he's safe, but I don't think he's a necessary play this week.
Yeah, and the ownership right now has Jimmy coming in at nearly 3 times the ownership of Byron, and that's with nearly $1,000 more worth of salary difference on DraftKings. Like I made this point in the cash portion of the article. I don't know why you would spend nearly $1,000 more for Johnson when Byron's probably got the exact same upside. And I mean, Johnson, you just don't know what's going on because it has been all of these finishes in the 30s to close out the season. And of course, narrative would say that this will be the race that he wins. But God, just the place that he and that team are at, and we know that that practically every resource at Hendrick has gone to that 9 team this week. So, I mean, yeah, I know they're both Hendrick drivers, but God, give me the one that's cheaper.
I mean, they're pretty similar priced on FanDuel. They're only $300 difference, but is it still William Byron no matter what?
God, I think just for the sake of momentum, I'm gonna side with Byron over Johnson. And you look at Johnson's finishes here since the reconfiguration: 12th, 4th, 14th, 8th, and 15th. So no finish worse than 15th. While Byron 10, 17, a 24th, and a 9th. So, they're almost practically the same driver. And let me look over here at FanDuel. Yeah, we've got Jimmy at 26.3 and William coming in at 14. So once again, it looks like the crowd is taking Jimmy in his swan song.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, you got Kyle and Kurt starting next to each other, 7th and 8th. Chris, let me get your thoughts on the Bushes here. And do you like either one of them in this spot?
I would say I like Kyle a lot more than Kurt. I mean, Phoenix has been an awesome track for Kyle Busch. Now, I know this season he hasn't really been much of a dominator, but I mean, he's really been the GOAT here in recent years. He ranks first in every single statistical category here and by a good margin in the past 6 races. He finished 3rd here back in March. Now, he didn't dominate, which is a common theme this season. He has not really dominated many tracks this year, but I mean, still starting at 8th at 9,600, the price is nice and he's got top 5 upside. And I mean, I don't really see him dominating, but if something happens on pit road strategy-wise, he could end up getting in front and getting some laps. And at 9,600, that'd be enough to get the job done. But as for Kurt Busch, I mean, he's like in a tough position because he usually starts where he's going to finish and he just doesn't offer us much upside. And I feel like he's a bit overpriced this weekend. So I'm probably out on Kurt, except for maybe a couple lineups in GPPs.
What's your thoughts, Phil?
Yeah, Kyle is the buy low driver this week with the, it's the narrative that he needs practice. He hasn't done well this year, but I mean, if you're looking for any kind of corollary, when Kyle has laps, that plays into his favor, and he generally performs better. And when he returns back to a track that he has race notes at, he generally does better. Kind of like what we just witnessed at Texas a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, like Chris said, Kyle's been fantastic here. The first 2 races after the reconfiguration, he won those. His other 2 finishes have been a 2nd and a 3rd. Kyle's, I don't know, like if maybe in single entry, he's that 3rd dominator that you add to one of your top guys, just because of how good he's been and how good he could be here. And quite frankly, he's underpriced considering that track history.
The other driver in this year we have not mentioned is Tyler Radek. He is starting 21st, 8,100 on DK, 7,600 on FanDuel. So I got to go to Phil because we know Phil is we know how much you love Tyler Reddick.
Number 1 in my heart. Tyler is in this weird area where I think he's preferred because of his $8,100 salary on DraftKings. I think he's preferred for tournaments, but like if you wanted to make the case to play him in cash, I wouldn't dissuade you from that. We only have one race here in the Cup Series for Tyler, and it doesn't look good just in the box score because he started 29th, but he finished 33rd. But I mean, in that race, Tyler was riding around the wall. He was laying down fast laps. In fact, he laid down 39 in that race. It's one of the weirder stats that you'll see is that somebody could have 39 fastest laps, but not a single lap led. He knew what he was doing, getting his way around. And throughout that race, I remember telling myself, I think he's being a little too aggressive, and eventually he was too aggressive, and he cut down a tire. You look at his average running position in that race; it was a 13.7. So I mean, he was solidly a top 15 driver, picking up those fastest laps. That's a guy a little more experience, a little more knowledge of what to do and what not to do here at this track in that car that I want to buy back in on.
Chris, what's your thoughts on Tyler Reddick?
My exact thoughts, because I wanted to bring up of how exactly fast he was at Phoenix. Like Phil mentioned, he had 39 fast laps, and that was the third most. But you got to keep in mind, he didn't run the full race. He only ran 260 laps. So who knows what that could have been. Like having the third most fast laps, only running 260 laps, and not even being a dominator, like getting up front leading laps. That was very impressive from Tyler Reddick, and having a race under his belt there. I think he's like a very, very strong tournament play. And I do think a lot of people are going to play William Byron, especially in cash games or in just in tournaments in general. So I think Reddick is a very nice pivot off of Byron. You can play both, but I do think Reddick will be lower owned than William Byron.
This is a NASCAR DFS strategy show right here on Awesemo.com. Of course, if you're unable to watch us live, this show is a part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. Go to Awesemo.com, get to links to where you can listen to the show on your favorite podcasting platform. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button here on YouTube. We really do appreciate that. And, of course, if you have any questions, leave those right now in the chat. We will get to those at the end of the show. And, of course, every day over at Awesemo.com, we do have free premium content. The free premium content today is NFL rankings and the MMA top fighters tool, so check that out. Moving on to tier number 3, this will be the drivers in the 7K and 6K range. So we got Clint Boyer starting 9th, Eric Amarola starting 10th, Matty D starting 12th, Austin Dillon starting 18th, Christopher Bell 17th, Chris Buescher 31st, Bubba Wallace 23rd, Cole Custer 15th, Matt Kenseth 16th, Ryan Newman 19th, Michael McDowell 29th, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. 20th, and Ty Dillon 22nd. Chris, let me start with you. Who is out of all these drivers, does one of them stick out to you?
I kind of like Eric Almirola in tournaments at 7,800. He's actually just pretty good at Phoenix. Now, his starting position makes it a little bit rough here to trust it, but I mean, he has 5 top 10 finishes recently at Phoenix. He finished 8th here back in March, and he was 7th in green flag speed. And in this tire combination, he's actually been surprisingly fast. 6th fastest green flag speed-wise in this exact tire combination. And I think he's a very similar play to Clint Boyer, who he's starting up beside his teammate. But I like Eric Almirola in tournaments at this price tag.
What's your thoughts on Amarola there, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a strong GPP play. Like Chris said, he's been very good here at Phoenix over the short term or the long term. You look at what he's done in the 750 horsepower package at shorter tracks, 4 top 10s out of the 5 races, average finish of a 12.6. He's been solid, but like Chris said, I mean, starting 10th, there's not that much place differential to milk out of that. So in order for him to be that much of a better play, like if you're looking for a pivot off of Reddick or off of Dillon and Bell below him, you're gonna need Almirola to find some access to some fastest laps in order to boost that score versus these guys who have access to place differential.
As you look at all these drivers in the 7K and 6K range on DK, is there a buyer beware on a driver? Phil, let's start with you, man.
Oh, I don't know how popular he's gonna be, but God, I have no trust in Matt Kenseth. I think Matt is just sailing off into the sunset at this point. I mean, it's rare that a driver gets a second retirement party. Let's see here. What is Matt? Yeah, I mean, last week at Richmond, not Richmond at Martinsville, he finished 14th, but everything before that was 39th, 40th, 34th. Yeah, and plus starting 16th. I mean, I can find a whole litany of guys that I prefer. A guy that I don't have highlighted for cash or GPP is Bubba. he's at a weird salary at $7K, considering that he's starting 23rd. You figure that DraftKings would have made that salary just a little bit lower. He does have a 10th place finish here in the very first race at Phoenix since the reconfiguration, but everything's been like 19th, 22nd, 25th. It really feels like Bubba is destined to finish where he starts.
Chris, what about you, man? Is there a driver here that maybe you just find yourself not having a ton of shares in?
Matt Kenseth, I exactly agree with Phil. Like, just my notes section, I just have pass written. Like, I'm not going to play Matt Kenseth here. And really, this is a weird price range because most of these guys, I think, are just straight tournament plays. I think there's one cash game play, and that's really just Chris Buescher at 7,200 since he's starting 31st. I mean, he finished 7th here back in March. He's got 4 top 20 finishes the past 6 races here. I'm not expecting a lot out of Chris Buescher, but with everyone else in this price range, they're all starting pretty high up, or they're just a little bit overpriced. And he's really the only one that offers us safe PD upside for the most part.
Yeah, what I do is I just take a black Sharpie, I just cross them off. I say, nope, not rostering that person. I have no interest in that person. In terms of some ones that maybe do stick out to you that haven't been mentioned, Chris, is there somebody in this tier that, I mean, obviously you mentioned about Amarola and the upside in GPP, but is there somebody, whether it's GPP or cash, that you do think has good upside?
I'm going to stick to GPPs here. And I think Clint Boyer and MDB both make some decent tournament plays here. Now, again, they're starting a little bit higher up than I'd like them, but you can make a case for them. Some MDB, he's 7th in average green flag speed here, and not here in this tire combination this year. And Penske seems to have these short flat tracks down. Now, I know he's not completely on Team Penske, but with Wood Brothers, he pretty much is, with Joey Logano, Keselowski, and Ryan Blaney. They've been very fast at these tracks. And Clint Boyer, again, starting a little bit too high here, but he's really good at these track types, and he finished 5th back here in March. And it's also his last Cure race if you guys like a good narrative.
Phil, what about you, man?
I don't know how much of a stepping out on a limb it is, but I think I'm going to find myself with a bit more Cole Custer than the field. Like we've seen him once here at Phoenix. And that was, he started 16th in the spring, finished 9th, ended up with 42 DraftKings points, 70.6 FanDuel points. You look at the corollary tracks. He's got two top 10s. Of course, one of those was here at Phoenix, and I believe the other one was at New Hampshire. 4 top 15s. Everybody priced below. Looking here. Yeah, practically everybody priced below Matty D. He's got a better average finish in the corollary track than everybody else. You know, starting 15th, there's a big wonder about just what his ceiling is, and the hope is with that depressed price at 6,900 that he's starting forward enough and that he has the car and the skill that he can hang around that 10th to 15th place position all day, stay on the lead lap, outscore these guys because they get put a lap or two down, and then maybe by the end of the race, because this has tended to be a bit more of a caution-filled race, and perhaps with a late caution, he can get on the preferred groove and sneak his way into the top 10.
In terms of point differential in this tier, you got Michael McDowell starting 29th, Chris Buescher starting 31st. Are they in your thought process in terms of GPP? Phil, we'll start with you, man.
They're definitely cash game plays. Like these are probably your safest plays in this tier just because of their place differential. And we saw in the spring that both of these guys were top 20 drivers. So I mean, if they can give you another top 20 finish, that's really all you need for cash. For tournaments, I think like it's weird. Like just because of that place differential, it's hard to get off of McDowell at that salary because you go up, there's, you look at Custer, Kenseth, Newman, you can add Bubba to that. Nobody else is starting nearly this far back and has just that built-in floor with them. And then you go underneath McDowell in this range. You've got Stenhouse and you've got Ty Dillon. Really the only kind of play right here that I see competing with McDowell just points wise is possibly Stenhouse. And, Stenhouse is going to need something near like a 10th place finish in order to reach that.
Of course, so let's move on to tier number 4. This will be the drivers that are in the 5K and 4K range on DraftKings. We got Ryan Pierce starting 24th, Daniel Suarez 30th, John Hunter Nemechek 27th, Corey LaJoy 28th, Garrett Smithley 39th, JJ Yeley 32nd, Joey Gase 37th, Josh Bilicki 38th, Timmy Hill 33rd, Brennan Poole 35th, Quinn Hoff 34th, and James Davidson number 36. I know we got a question about Corey LaJoy, about maybe taking a flyer on him, but we'll tell you Corey LaJoy is he right now projected highest ownership in this tier. Chris, we'll start with you, man.
I could see that. I mean, my first reaction on Corey LaJoy, like, is he a good play? I mean, maybe he's got top 25 upside, but he's only 5,300. I just think he's a little bit underpriced. I think he's right beside Garrett. Who's he right beside?
Right above
Garrett Smithley, Yaley Gase. Like, he should be a little bit more expensive than that. And he's shown upside so far this season. I mean, it's just top 25 upside for, I mean, really, really cheap just to fit in those dominators.
Phil, what's your thoughts on Corey LaJoy?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what you're doing with your top 2 dominators in cash, and then your debate about Jimmy versus Byron, you may find yourself down here with trying to punt to fill your last cash spot. And if that's LaJoy, I mean, that's fine. You don't have to worry. I don't think you have to worry about him falling back into the 30s. He's probably a 24th through a 28th place driver. But that's why you're playing him, is that he's underpriced. 4K on FanDuel, 5,300 on DraftKings. Yeah, he gives you place differential, although probably not that much, but he saves you money.
The one of the drivers that we mentioned last week here on the show, Phil and Chris, you can talk about him here as well, and that is Quinn Hoff. Once again, seeing notable ownership. So you want to explain this one to me?
Do people have him confused with somebody else? Quinn, like, I don't. Okay, maybe it's the salary at 4,600, and if this was a Richmond or a Martinsville race, then that would make a lot more sense when you're just trying to jam in salary, and this guy's 4,600. Yeah, quite frankly, I don't think you need Quinn Hoff, especially with him starting 34th. I mean, if you are below 5K and you're needing some salary relief, I think I'd much rather play Brennan Poole than Mr. Hoff. Davison, I'm just gonna give him the nod wave. This will be the first time that he's seen Phoenix, so I don't know what the Indy driver is going to think of when he lays down his first laps here. And especially if he's in the 53 this week, then that just makes him even that more unlikable.
Chris, what's your thoughts on what we're seeing ownership-wise on Hoff here?
Well, I'm going to be honest. What I do every single week is if it's not a super speedway, I just exit all of these guys out. So below Corey LaJoy, I just don't play them because I looked through all the 2020 optimal lineups. It's on my spreadsheet. Besides super speedways, they have not made one optimal lineup this year. So just to keep it simple, I exit them out. And if people ask me about them, I just say don't play them. So
I think Phil had the best line a couple weeks ago. He says, if you're down in this tier, you might want to start over. You might want to start your roster construction over.
Yep.
But is there anyone who you think is underpriced in this tier?
Oh man, so for looking at Brennan Poole, he at least finished 31st here before, and he's starting 35th, 4,700. Maybe it gets you like one of those 3 of those Final 4 drivers, and if they all dominate at some point, and a Poole just isn't absolutely awful and wrecks out of the race, maybe it works out. But I just can't really see anything optimal because they just don't have upside really.
What's your thoughts, Phil?
Yeah, that's really it. Is you're painting a picture here with your lineup, and you're saying that these expensive guys are all gonna take up 25, 30+% of the dominator points. So therefore, you need one of these cheaper guys in there. I can kind of sort of half-heartedly make a case for JJ Yeley. He's got back-to-back finishes in the top 30. That's nothing to scream about, especially for a driver starting 32nd. and you've got a little bit of narrative because this is his official, unofficial hometown track. So, I mean, at least there's something there in the history-wise with Yaley to say that he can possibly finish with the top 30. And I mean, if we just want to look at the previous race, Joey Gase started. He ended up finishing 29th, and now he starts 37th. So he's got a little bit more place differential than what Yaley has. I mean, once again, it's don't go heavy on these guys. The first lineups that I started building this morning in 20 max, I ended up with 50% Brennan Poole, and I immediately trashed the whole thing. You know, and quite frankly, I played around with Fantasy Cruncher a lot this morning, and I just could not get the stupid rules to do what I wanted. So I foresee tomorrow morning going to be a lot of hand building.
Of course, if you do have any questions, be sure to fire those up right now, whether it's here on YouTube or in our premium Slack account. Of course, this is the NASCAR DFS strategy show. And of course, be sure to sign up right now for NFL Weekly Pass, Express Pass for $3.95. This gives you everything you need for NFL Showdown single game contest formats. You get access to Awesemo Showdown single game player projections, ownership projections, the top plays tool, and so much more. Sign up right now at awesemo.com/join. Get an NFL Weekly Express Pass for $3.95. Of course, also be sure to check out Odd Shopper while you're there as well. And of course, all the free premium content we have there every day, as I mentioned. NFL rankings and MMA top fighters tool is our free premium content up today. Come up here at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be on the contrary. It will get you ready for tomorrow's NFL action. Then myself and Pete Rogers Jr. will be on at 5:30 p.m. each time for MMA Live Before Lock. But let's get into the listener questions, guys. First off, Kay says, when it comes to lineup construction, do you want more point differential or dominator heavy? Chris, we'll start with you, man.
It totally depends on the track. Like if we're at Martinsville, dominators like we were last week. If it's a super speedway, straight place differential. At Phoenix here, we have 312 laps, so we're kind of in the middle. So, I mean, it just has to be an even balance, like 2 to 3 dominators per lineup. If you're playing cash, you want 2 dominators and focus on place differential. If you're in tournaments, you can go a little bit more top heavy and take some risk down low. But it's kind of just like in the middle this week where you need to find a nice even balance.
What's your thoughts, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, with 312 laps, we're really in the middle. Like, you can make the case for 2, you can make the case for 3. I think this really boils down to how you've seen this race playing itself out tomorrow, and just how caution happy that it gets. But like Chris said, very minimum, you're gonna need 2, but at the max, you're probably just looking at 3.
John asked, best contrarian play on FanDuel. So I just took a peek, as I knew that was going to be the next question. So I was looking at ownership and just looking at high price drivers, and Joey Logano is the lowest. He's under 15%. So that was kind of maybe where I was leaning. Maybe it is Joey Logano as a contrarian play just because of what we're seeing ownership wise.
Okay, I've got mine, and this really surprises me. At 5,500. We've got Ryan Preece projected on FanDuel for just 2.6% ownership. Preece, despite his flaws, when it comes to this sort of venue, he's been remarkably good. 4 out of these 5 corollary races, he has a top 20 finish. Now that average finish is sitting at 19.8, but I mean, compared to everybody else, he feels like the most likely out of Dylan, Suarez, Hunter, Lejoy, Stenhouse, all of these guys to actually work his way into the top 20, if not maybe the top 15, and fight and keep his position.
Chris, what's your thoughts?
I totally agree with Ryan Preece. I'm surprised. What did you say, around 2%?
2.6.
Yeah, 4 top 20 finishes at these tracks this season. Finished 18th back here in March. I mean, yeah, at that price tag, yeah, I definitely like Ryan Preece. And you mentioned Joey Logano was pretty low on over in there as well. And I like him quite a bit on DraftKings too. And he's been the fastest driver here at short flat tracks this season. He won back here in March. I mean, if he's going to be really low, and I definitely don't mind being overweight on Joey Logano.
Next question comes from Amanda. Says, I always have to dumpster dive. So who's the last driver y'all pick on cash games?
Corey Lejoy for me.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go lower than 5,300 on DraftKings cash, you're opening up a hole in your floor.
Amanda also says, do you guys think Kyle Busch will try to repay Harvick for the love tap, or will he let it go?
That is the buried lead from last week. Because I mean, God, what would have NASCAR have done if Eric Jones had passed Denny Hamlin late in that race, and Harvick dumps Kyle on the last turn and forces this weird three-way split? I mean, it just would have been all sorts of chaos for NASCAR. Quite frankly, I don't think Kyle cares. I mean, he's not in the championship. The move didn't cost him the championship. The move really didn't cost Harvick the championship, because Harvick had been running so poorly all day. I think it's just probably bygone.
Yeah, Kyle's not really a dirty racer. I know people don't like him, but I mean, he's a respectable driver.
Next up, R. Stanley says, since I'm a big Chase Elliott fan, should he be my most owned dominator?
Sure. I mean, he's on the pole. He's got clean air to work with him. He led the most laps here back in March. I mean, again, you got clean air, which has been huge in NASCAR this season. I mean, I'm all for Chase Elliott. He just dominated a short flat track this last weekend. He's been very super fast at these types of tracks so far this season, and second overall in green flag speed. I mean, you can make so many cases for Chase Elliott this week.
Phil?
Yeah, the last three optimals here at Phoenix, the pole sitter has been in them all. And in fact, the last four races since the reconfiguration, if I'm looking at the laps led data page, right? Yeah, the pole sitter has either led the most laps or the second most laps here at Phoenix. I mean, Chase, he's in a really good position. We know that he's done fairly well in this package. I mean, crap, we just go back to this most recent race here. He was in the same position starting on the pole, and I do believe, yeah, he led the most laps that day at 93 with 60 fastest laps.
Do you look at Chase and Brad as maybe one of the most popular combos tomorrow?
I think that just in a dual dominator build, that's probably going to be the highest owned combo on DraftKings.
What's your thoughts, Chris?
That's exactly. If I'm building one lineup, I'm starting with Brad Keselowski and Chase Elliott, because one, I'd like to play Joey Logano, but I know it's worked out in the past. So it's starting with the guys that start 1 and 2. It does feel a little bit weird. So you get that one extra place differential spot with Keselowski, and I think you take me really dominator, then Brad Keselowski be the second dominator later on in the race.
I mean, since you kind of bring it up there, I know we have a lot of single entry players that do watch or listen to the show. I mean, Chris, your thought is if you're single entry, that's where you start, and then you just build from there?
That's what I'm leaning right now, Keselowski and Chase Elliott.
What about you, Phil?
That's exactly where I'm at. I mean, we haven't talked about it too much, but if you just look at Phoenix, New Hampshire, Richmond, Brad's averaging 152.7 laps led in these three races. I mean, and Brad told everybody he gave away the cheat code. He told everybody on Sunday, I am bringing that car from New Hampshire and Richmond to this race. So, I mean, God, I want to have 100% Brad Keselowski tomorrow.
Yeah, I saw your article where you embedded that tweet into your article. I know this is a question that we talked about a little earlier, just because we got a question now about, I want to bring it back up, of William Byron versus Jimmy Johnson. And Chris, I know you kind of talked about this a lot. I'll let you start to kind of rehash what you said a little earlier in the show.
So I think the big thing is he's about $1,000 cheaper, and I feel like there's the same exact play. They're in similar equipment, so why not just take the salary savings with William Byron and make a more balanced lineup? He's got an average green flag speed rating of 12.2 at these similar tracks this season. He finished 10th here back in March, and short flat tracks are very good for William Byron, one of his best track types in his the past 10 races we've ran here, or similar tracks.
I don't know, Phil, if there's anything else. I know we touched on that earlier. If there's something else you wanted to bring up about this topic.
No, it's just how it's weird just how similar Jimmy and Byron have been of late here at Phoenix and throughout this year. Like, there's only 3 positions that separate their average finish over the last 4 races. You look at the corollary tracks this year, Jimmy's got an average finish. I was just looking at average finish of 19th, while William has an average finish of 17th. Looking at the fastest laps, they're pretty similar. Same thing for laps led. I mean, it feels like they're essentially the same driver, just separated by 20 years worth of age difference. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why you pay $1,000 more for one than the other.
And of course, if you've got a question for Phil or Chris, you can hit up in our premium Slack account if you're one of our subscribers, or hit them up on Twitter as well. They will get back to you. Of course, come up here in about 40 minutes from now. We got On the Contrary, the guys will get you ready for tomorrow's NFL action. And then at 5:30, it'll be MMA Live Before Lock. So that is going to do it for this edition of the NASCAR DFS Strategy Show right here at Awesemo.com.